All right, welcome back to the channel. My name is Coach Jordan Hargrave. So today we're going to be finishing off this email that somebody sent me where they're experiencing very severe depersonalization realization after going to a barber shop, getting a haircut. They felt trapped, they felt overwhelmed, they had a panic attack, and then they started to experience depersonalization realization. They're making a lot of mistakes as far as what they're trying to do to get rid of it, and I want to see you avoid those mistakes, as well as point you to what works, so that way whether you work with me or somebody else, you actually rewire your nervous system and they get the help that you need. So let's go ahead and finish this. This will be the last installment in this video series. If you made it to the end, smash a like. And if you haven't watched the first two, go back on my channel and I'll try to also put them in the description. Let's get this thing rocking and rolling. Also, subscribe if you're dealing with anxiety, panic, depersonalization, realization, obsessive thoughts, and compulsive behaviors as well. These are the things that I specialize in and help people with, and things that I went through myself before I recovered. So let's go ahead and get this thing going. And I've also got my blueberry coffee here in this very manly cuddle season mug, which is my wife's. Yeah, it is. All right. I tried talk therapy. My therapist is nice, but when I explained it, she kind of smiled and said, "You're probably just overthinking." Yeah, so I love therapists. I love psychiatrists. I love social workers. I get to work with usually at least a dozen of them every year. And they're going through their own symptoms because of just a very painful history. In fact, you'll find that a lot of what motivates people to go into the mental health field is because they went through their own trauma. They went through their own mental health issues, and it developed a compassion to help other people. However, you can have all the passion in the world, but if you're not properly self-regulating whenever you're working with people who are suffering, or you just don't have enough self-care as well, or I should say, and you don't have enough self-care, because you need both. You need to self-regulate whenever you're around suffering people, but you also need to have enough self-care. You need to have energy boundaries. And if you don't have those things and you're constantly around people that are suffering, there is a chance that you'll end up with something called compassion fatigue, which is where you get just very, very burnt out. You're very sensitive to your clients' suffering, and you get very, very fatigued. And I've dealt with that twice in the last 8 years since I've started doing this. It usually happens whenever I'm just getting a sudden influx of a ton of clients. But I have structured the way that I do things to where I don't think it's probably going to ever happen again. But it definitely can happen without you expecting it. And so with that being said, I'm even working with a therapist right now and she's starting to see some awesome results, but I'm very convinced that she's experiencing some compassion fatigue because she's around suffering people all day long. And she says, whenever they're telling me about all their stuff, like I start to dissociate, I start to feel very overwhelmed, but then she feels trapped because she can't leave. And she is, the person that's there to help them. And so it just creates a lot of challenges. And if you are in the care field in any capacity, whether, it's a teacher or a licensed mental professional, or a doctor, or, you name it, you have to prioritize self-regulation, which is keeping the adrenaline, emotion, and the tension, adrenaline, and emotion out of your body, as well as have very high levels of self-care and boundaries in your life. Otherwise, you're going to end up very, very, very overwhelmed. Okay. But anyway, so I love therapists, and I think that most of them got into that field because they wanted to help people. But unfortunately, whenever it comes to trauma, which is what causes depersonalization realization, and I know if you're new to the channel, you hear that, you're like, wait a second, that can't be right. I've never been through any trauma. Well, you're thinking with a 20th century lens, okay? You're seeing trauma as a natural disaster, loss of a loved one, car accident, going off to war. This is an antiquated 20th century understanding of trauma. A 21st century understanding of trauma would say that trauma is a state of overwhelming stress in the nervous system and body. Whenever our brain perceives threat or there's an actual threat, our nervous system responds with a hierarchy of responses based upon their evolutionary development. This is according to Dr. Stephen Porges, who founded the polyvagal theory understanding of the nervous system in the 90s. First, we look to other people to calm us down. If that doesn't work, then we go into fight or flight response. And then if we feel too trapped and overwhelmed to fight or flee, then we go into the freeze response. And this is also called a trauma response. And it's at that point that there are a lot of different things that start to happen in preparation to possibly be eaten by a lion. And one of those things that happens is there's a shutdown of the brain structures that are responsible for you feeling connected to your body, yourself, and the material world. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, calls it the mohawk of self-awareness because it forms kind of like a mohawk haircut as far as how the brain structures look. It's kind of an easy way to remember that. And what that translates into is you feel detached from your body. You may look at your hands and they feel like they're not your own hands. You may look in the mirror, you feel like you're looking at a stranger. You may look around you and people feel like they're strangers even though you've known them for years. You may hear your own voice and it sounds like a stranger's voice. You also may feel detached from the material world. So that would be derealization, where it feels like there's a wall of glass between you and reality. For me, it felt like I slipped out of reality. I was sitting in a movie theater watching my life play out before my eyes as a spectator, and everything was kind of turned down. It was like very dull, kind of cold, colorless. And also another thing that happens in a trauma state is your perception of time can be messed up. There's something in the brain, I believe it's called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, but it's basically the timekeeper. And whenever the timekeeper starts to shut down, your perception of time gets messed up. You might feel like things happen very fast or things happen very slow. And so you couple that as well with, severe anxiety symptoms, and it all creates this experience that is absolutely debilitating. Now, if there were a lion there or some sort of actual existential threat, like let's say you're being eaten by a lion, I would definitely want to feel out of body. I definitely would not want to be in my body if Tony the Tiger is eating me. I definitely would not want to feel connected to the material world, okay? I would definitely want to go emotionally numb, which is another thing that can happen in deep states of traumatic stress. But this person was at a barber shop. And the clients that I work with, most of them have not necessarily been through the traditional understanding as far as traumatic events. Most of them have just had a very painful history, which is complex trauma. It's not a singular situation that overwhelms their nervous system. It's repeated stress and adversity over a period of time. And the stress just kind of builds up almost like a snowball effect. And then there's usually some sort of tipping point. For me, it was a bad experience with marijuana in 2008. I had a panic attack, thought I was dying. I felt deja vu while I was smoking the marijuana, which caused my heart to start pounding. I ran outside, and then I thought I was dying of a heart attack. I looked to my friends to calm me down. They didn't calm me down. I basically started pacing back and forth to try to get away from the feeling of my heartbeat. And I kept saying, Jordan, you're okay. Jordan, you're okay. That didn't work. Then I said, call an ambulance. My friends wouldn't call an ambulance. And all of a sudden, I felt like my mind was kind of hovering just like a little bit behind me and to the left. Not a full out of body experience, but I kind of saw myself pacing back and forth. And then I looked at my friends and, it looked like I was watching a movie. I remember looking at the street light in the car, and everything just felt very cold and colorless and in slow motion. Like I was literally watching a movie. That's the only analogy that could describe it. And once that happened, it made me panic even more because I didn't know why it was happening. But anyway, with that being said, let's go back to the therapist situation. A lot of therapists and licensed mental professionals don't know how to deal with depersonalization because they haven't been properly trained on how to deal with trauma, particularly the physiological effects of trauma, because that's really what trauma is, okay? Trauma is not about what happened in the past. It's about what's left over from these painful past experiences, which is a body that's constantly preparing for a threat that never comes. You're experiencing sensory data around you that is similar to painful past experiences, and it's confusing your nervous system, making it believe that there's a threat in the present, and your body is stuck in fight, flight, freeze. And the very unfortunate thing is that the way that a neural pathway works is the more that it fires, the more faster and efficient that it becomes at putting you into, in this case, fight, flight, freeze response. That means that as time is going by, your body is getting more and more efficient at going into these responses, which also means that because your body is such a war zone, you're going to have to get better and better at separating from your body. You're going to have to get better and better at numbing your body. And this is where especially addictive behaviors come in: nicotine, alcohol, binge eating, drugs, other things that I won't mention on YouTube. And of course, living in your head all day. Even obsessing over existence sometimes is a dissociative outlet, so you don't have to be in your body, or obsessing over your health all the time. But of course, living in the past, living in the future, daydreaming all the time. You're going to find that the more time that goes on, whenever you're not dealing with the trauma in your body, you're going to have to get better and better and better at separating from your body. Hold on one second. Okay, I'm back. My wife needed something. But anyway, and this is basically all about getting back to homeostasis, right? We're wired to feel better. And whenever you don't know how to feel better through interoception, which is the experience of the embodied self, and befriending your body and regulating your body and nervous system, you're going to find some way to feel better. So don't feel ashamed for these things. Usually whenever clients start working with me, there's 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5, addictive behaviors, definitely lots of dissociative behaviors. Dissociation comes from a Latin root word that means to sever or separate. So it's just the different ways that our brain separates us from painful experiences. But anyway, so people go to a therapist and they typically see trauma as a past event. In fact, I've got a lady that I'm working with right now. She's been suffering for over 30 years, and she went to multiple well-meaning therapists. And I want to be very clear. I love therapists. Okay. This is an issue of training, but she went to many well-meaning therapists, and they really didn't know much about depersonalization realization. But they had her looking for an event. Right? They're like, okay, we got to find the event. We got to find the event because that's what's causing your depersonalization realization. She went for years and they never could find it. After she started working with me, and we kind of took a deep dive into her history, the period of time leading up to her experiencing severe anxiety, panic, and depersonalization realization, she was in a very, very stressful environment, and it was repeated stress over time, like filling up a cup of water or a cup of blueberry coffee in this case, which is the best coffee in my opinion. But anyway, with that being said, that was a big breakthrough for her because she suddenly was like, okay, wait a second. I've been searching for an event for years whenever it wasn't even a singular event that caused my nervous system to go into these symptoms. It was repeated stress and adversity over a period of time. So anyway, and then unfortunately, a therapist, a well-meaning, good therapist will try to have them just talk about, maybe just painful life experiences, their childhood, talk about the symptoms without dealing with the trauma, which is that their body is constantly going into fight, flight, freeze response. That's how we address the trauma that is indirectly causing depersonalization realization, is we do things in the present moment to show your body that there is no danger. I've actually got a new client. He started working with me 2 weeks ago. And don't let this trigger you, especially wait to what I'm about to say. He had a panic attack when he was 16 and started to experience depersonalization realization. He's now 70. He's been working with me for 2 weeks, and this doesn't usually happen. So I want to be very clear, okay? It takes most people several months to really see significant results like this, but it just seems like sometimes people recover really, really fast, and he's not fully recovered at all. But he said, Jordan, my depersonalization realization has dropped from 100% down to 30%. And he said, I'm actually starting to enjoy my life again. And that was, I remember talking to him on the phone, after he had spoken with one of my team members. I just called him up whenever he first joined, and I was just kind of hearing his story. And I was like, listen, I've got another person in my program right now. She's in her 70s, which most of my clients are like between 18 and 45, but I work with people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s too. But I'm like, you know what? We can make the last part of your life amazing. Okay, I know obviously you're up there in years, and your mind may be telling you like, hey, my life's over, it's too late at this point, but I believe that you can finish strong. And to see him starting to enjoy his life again after all these years of suffering, it fills me with incredible joy. And it's why I keep doing this, is stories like that. And so anyway, so with that being said, talking about symptoms actually can make things worse, because what is the association with symptoms, right? Stress. And so let's say that you had a bacterial infection and you were just talking about the symptoms of a bacterial infection without taking antibiotics and getting to the root of it. You're talking about the sneezing. You're talking about the pain of the headaches. You're talking about the earaches and all of this stuff. Like, there is a time to talk about things. In fact, I have a therapist that I hired. He's an amazing local therapist, just to listen to me talk about stuff, because all I do, like my entire life, is pouring out to other people, either my clients or my family, which is amazing, and I'm so fulfilled and love that. But it's like nobody ever really asks about me, and I have my own stuff that I deal with. It's not symptoms, but I deal with just challenges in life, and it's been great, just to show up for an hour and just have somebody to vent to. And he doesn't say too much, but he just kind of confirms things and gives a few tips. I love talk therapy. I think everybody could use some talk therapy. Having a safe person to really listen to you and, co-regulate you is great. But just because we're talking about, or just because talk therapy may be good for a lot of things, does not mean that it's good for everything. In fact, depending on the circumstance, talking about things actually may make somebody worse. And I cannot tell you how many clients that I've worked with that showed up to talk therapy for depersonalization, realization, particularly, and other trauma symptoms for years, sometimes over a decade, sometimes multiple decades. And let's not throw out therapists, and let's not throw out talk therapy. But let's just accept that there are some things going on that require a much more nuanced approach than just talking about symptoms. Or maybe they do kind of some CBT or, some EMDR, which I love those things too. But the way that you heal trauma, which will indirectly heal the trauma coping mechanisms of depersonalization realization, is we specifically do things that communicate safety to the brain, body, and nervous system. What are those things? I say it in almost every YouTube video, so that way you can go out there and get these things regardless of whether it's with me or somebody else. These are what hundreds and hundreds of studies show is what rewires the nervous system, okay? There have been meta-analyses that have looked at these things. Self-regulation. Okay, first we got to get you back in your body. Whenever I work with clients, I'm like, your body's like a hoarder's house and you've been checked out. We have to go through this process of getting you back in your body, which takes time. It's very slow, actually, to get back in the body. And there's a lot of chaos that you cannot feel right now. I know it's hard for you to believe that because people in this state don't think that they have a lot happening in their body, but that's because they're somatically dissociated. Somatic means body, dissociation means to separate. That was me for over 15 years. I literally wasn't even really aware that I had a body unless I was like having a panic attack or something. And whenever I started to build interoception and I started to get back in tune with my body, I was shocked at the tension, the adrenaline, the emotion, the fatigue that was happening. But once we can feel, we can heal, right? Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, he was asked one time at a seminar on trauma, he was asked, what heals trauma? And he said, I'll tell you what heals trauma. Interoception heals trauma. Remember, interoception is the experience of the embodied self. Trauma, which is a body that is constantly preparing for a threat that never comes, is what's producing depersonalization realization. Is also producing distortions of perception of time, memory issues, and also usually people have anxiety with that as well, depending on what state of trauma that they're in. Trauma is about what's happening in the here and now. Your body's preparing for a threat that never comes. And so to heal trauma is to get you back in your body, feeling your embodied self, and then befriending the body, releasing the tension, adrenaline, emotion, and fatigue from the body. Or not fatigue, tension, adrenaline, emotion from the body, as well as making lifestyle adjustments that will get rid of fatigue as well. And then people need a lot of co-regulation as they're doing that. It's a very up and down process getting back in the body and befriending the body. And we also need to face sensory triggers. That's another thing. So we've got self-regulation. The next is exposure. I teach my clients to face 3 types of triggers because whenever you avoid something, your brain assumes that it's a lion trying to eat you. And that's part of what's created this web of stress, this onion of stress that's keeping you stuck. Sensory triggers. So that's obviously sensory data that has been conditioned to be associated with threat because of painful experiences. It's formed something called sensory triggers. You face your triggers, but you don't just face your triggers. We also teach them to couple that with relaxation because that doubles the signals of safety that are being sent to your nervous system. You wouldn't Do exposure and relaxation if there was a lion present, so it desensitizes them. The next thing is facing somatic triggers. This is facing your body. Maybe you've got, for me, I had a heartbeat phobia, for example. I teach my clients to intentionally face their body, also coupled with relaxation. The next thing is symptom triggers, and this is acceptance, okay? And if you follow me on my channel, you'll hear I am not against acceptance. I love acceptance. What I am against is this belief that once you detach resistance, that it's going to rewire your nervous system. Let's think about that for a second. You had to have had a dysregulated nervous system for there to be symptoms to resist. And so, yes, decoupling resistance from the symptoms is powerful. And for some people, it can really, really downregulate their nervous system. But I did that the first year that I dealt with panic and depersonalization, realization. And my symptoms went away for a little while, but then they started to come back. Little glimpses of the symptoms, and then eventually they came back 24/7. And I tried acceptance and it didn't work because there was too much buildup. So what happens is people will have a lot of resistance of symptoms, and then they'll invite it in, and it produces such a profound effect on them that they go around telling everybody like, hey, this is it. And that was me. I preached the acceptance gospel. But because I didn't self-regulate and do these other things that I'm talking to you, I accidentally hit the pause button. Because I didn't self-regulate and face my sensory, somatic, and symptom trigger. Well, I face symptom triggers, but not sensory and somatic, and several other things. My symptoms came back. Okay, and so I love acceptance. And yes, what this looks like is we start to invite in the symptoms. I tell my clients, personify them, talk to them like they're a person, welcome them to be there because they're not dangerous. And that's why you need the right neuroscience of this so you can start to invite them in. You need to know how your brain, body, and nervous system works. This is one of the first things I do with my clients is I give them probably about 6 to 7 hours of training on how their nervous system works in different states of survival. So that way you can do this thing called cognitive restructuring, where you can start to be like, okay, wait a second, no. That's just fight, flight, freeze. It's not me going crazy. It's not that my brain's broken. It's that my body's going into a state of survival. It's really, really, really important. So self-regulation, exposure, cognitive restructuring, self-regulation, co-regulation, exposure, cognitive restructuring. The last one is lifestyle adjustments, okay? This is things that you probably need to do anyway, but it's important because remember, we're trying to get your body in the best state possible in terms of relaxation, hydration, nutrition, exercise, vitamin D, either sunlight exposure or supplementing, omega-3s. These are all very, very, very important, okay? And whenever we do these 5 things over and over and over again, it is almost miraculous what starts to happen, okay? People start to break free, even if it's been years, even if they don't believe that they can recover. It doesn't matter. Whenever we show your body and nervous system that there's no lion, your nervous system responds, okay? And I've actually had like 4 or 5 clients that have gotten a tattoo that says no lion after I've helped them recover. And I'm not telling you to do that. I think tattoos are mostly a terrible idea. Put a lot of thought into it if you get a tattoo. So anyway, with that being said, even moments of connection, my girlfriend laughing, hugging me, feeling slightly off like I'm watching it happen to somebody else, feels slightly off like I'm watching it happen to somebody else. I know I should be grateful to have her, but I just feel numb. Yeah, that's one of the more debilitating things is whenever you go to connect with your significant other and you don't feel an emotional connection to them because of your symptoms. It's heartbreaking, but what's even worse is you can't even feel the heartbreak because of how numb that you are. And it can really create a gap between you and your significant other because you being able to feel that connection for them is a significant part of the relationship. But I'm telling you, every single month I see marriages, I see relationships of all kinds be transformed because for the first time in a long time, the person's body is not a war zone, and suddenly they can start to feel the connection again to their spouse. It's such a beautiful thing when that happens. It doesn't happen all at once. It's usually a glimmer, it goes away, glimmer just goes away, but it's 100% reversible, okay? I keep wondering if the panic attack did something permanent, like my brain overheated and broke some invisible part of me. Sometimes I think, what if this version of me feels real again? Or what if this version of me never feels real again? Yeah, the number one fear that people have when they're going through severe anxiety, panic, and depersonalization realization is the fear of permanence. And part of that is because, in particular, once you reach a state of traumatic stress, which is what produces depersonalization realization, there's a part of the brain that would allow you to see an end to your suffering that goes offline. And it's one thing if you're suffering, but you know that you're going to get out of it. Or maybe there's like a certain time period. You're like, okay, maybe it's 6 months. Like, I can handle that. But whenever you feel like death and it appears that there's no end, that is the definition of hell and torment. But what I want to tell you is that this isn't your fear. This is this is the number one fear that I had whenever I was suffering with severe anxiety, panic, and depersonalization realization, and it is the number one fear of my clients. So let that encourage you that it's not your fear. It's just your anxious brain feeding you with this fear in the absence of seeing a clear path out. And Andrew Huberman, the neuroscientist, has talked about this. Our brain typically responds to conflict with duration, path, outcome. So how long is this going to last? What is the path out and what will be the outcome? And whenever you don't know how long it's going to last, you don't see a path out, your brain kind of deduces that the only outcome is that this is permanent. And I remember sitting at my mom's table after I'd just been trying for so many months to get rid of depersonalization, realization, and panic. And at that point, I didn't even know what those things were. And I basically remember looking at the wall and I was like, I'm the person in my family that went crazy. I can't believe it happened to me. I'll never be able to get married and have kids and we'll never have a life. It felt so real. Nobody could have convinced me that that wasn't the truth, but it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And that's the thing is you can 100% believe something and it also be 100% untrue. Okay. The part of your brain that would allow you to see how illogical that is also diminished in functionality, which is your prefrontal cortex, logical, critical, creative, contextual thinking. And so there is hope despite what your brain is telling you. Okay. And my clients have this fear all the time and they still beat these symptoms. Okay. And then I go back online looking for reassurance, searching DPDR recovery success stories, even though I already know that's what's keeping me stuck. Yeah, it's like reassurance is not bad. I mean, who doesn't want to be reassured that the fears that they have are not going to come true? But if that's all that you're doing, is getting reassurance and you're not self-regulating and you're not doing these other things that I was telling you about that really show your nervous system that you're safe, you're not actually rewiring your nervous system. I remember I used to call my aunt, who's a doctor, whenever I was having like really severe health anxiety, and she would be like, oh, no, Jordan, I don't think you're having a heart attack. She'd be like, if you're concerned, go to the ER. But no, like this just doesn't sound like a heart attack to me. And or I'd have some bump and I'd like want to send her a picture. And one time she was like, Jordan, like, I don't know if I want to see that. But it would calm my nervous system until the next time I got triggered. And then my nervous system would escalate. And then I'd look to her and then it'd calm me down until the next time that I got escalated at my nervous system. And it just created a loop. It creates what I call the reassurance loop. And so we have to look to the body in particular, okay? You have to go through the process of making your body your safe place again if you really want to not be codependent on external reassurance. It's one thing if you're rewiring your body and nervous system and you're getting reassurance. I give my clients reassurance sometimes. But it's another thing if that's all there is. And I can't tell you how many people start working with me and they're like, yeah, every time that I get symptoms, I'll pull up your YouTube channel or somebody else's YouTube channel and I'll watch a recovery story or I'll watch one of your videos because you tend to be so encouraging, and then I'll be calm for a little bit and then the symptoms always come back 6 months later or a year later. And I'm like, I'm telling you, there is healing if you will get your body into the state that it needs to be in. Your body is a war zone and it's fixable. And reassurance, also another problem with that is eventually if your body gets to a certain point, even reassurance won't do much for you because your body is just too much of a war zone. Just because something is working now doesn't mean that it's going to work forever. You know, remember what I talked about at the very beginning, which if you're still at the very end, let me know in the comments below because this is a 30-minute video, so you're very dedicated. But I talked about how whenever a neural pathway fires, it gets stronger and more efficient. And so you start off with like, a dirt road, and then suddenly it becomes a paved road. And then all of a sudden you've got a 2-lane highway, and then eventually a 10-lane highway. And the coping mechanisms that you can use to de-escalate your nervous system in more mild levels of stress and anxiety won't always work once you get into traumatic stress and deeper levels of trauma. And so that's also sometimes a wake up call for people. It's like, wait a second, I used to be able to just, hit the gym really hard, or I used to be able to just, clean up my diet or prioritize my sleep or just invite in the symptoms or do this or that. And my nervous system would always feel better. But now that's not working. And that's kind of like a wake up call. Like, wait a second, this is getting more severe. And so don't wait until that point. Okay. Do what you need to do now with your body and nervous system. So your videos have been the only thing that makes any of this make sense. For once, someone actually explains that this is the body's way of protecting itself, not proof that I'm broken. This gives me some hope. Maybe not the kind of hope that fixes everything right now, but the kind that makes me want to try again tomorrow. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that my videos give you hope. If you're looking to rewire your nervous system, I have created what I call the 5 shifts to eliminate anxiety, panic, and depersonalization realization. This masterclass is going to show you the 5 shifts that you need to make. And if you don't make these, it's going to be very difficult to recover. There's a link in the first pinned comment as well as the description. And I spent 6 months on this, literally like 11 hours a day, several years ago, just to make sure that it's a resource for you. So that way, again, whether you work with me or somebody else, human to human, I want you to feel better. Yes, I have a program called Rise. Yes, people are getting their life back and it's amazing. But the purpose of this channel is to equip you with what you need so that way you can get on a recovery path, okay? So with that being said, watch the masterclass. It'll help you. Again, smash the like button so we can get this out into the algorithm. I need your help with that. Comment something below. Subscribe, join this family, and that is it. So if you want to email me, email stories@coachjordanhargrave.com, and I may read your email on the channel. That way we can help you, encourage you, as well as help other people. Okay, that is it, and I hope you have an awesome day. Thanks.